All right, so now we'll get to the main event. I would love to have all of our panelists come up. I'm going to introduce them to you one at a time. They're all really fantastic, and we are thrilled to have all four of them tonight. First up, she is in town, and we're so thrilled she agreed to join our all-star panel. All right, we have international human rights attorney, author of A Human Algorithm, professor, fellow at Harvard and Yale. Let's give it up for Flynn Coleman. All right, next up tonight, we have the executive director of JFF Labs at Jobs for the Future. Let's give it up for Kristina Francis. All right, and we are so thrilled tonight. We have from our good friends at Consumer Reports, we have the Director of Product R&D for Innovation Labs at Consumer Reports. Let's have a warm welcome for Ginny Fahs. And finally, we are super thrilled to have with us tonight Senior Consultant at Deloitte, Trustworthy AI Strategist. Let's give it up for Danielle Sutton. All right, so we have this amazing panel. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. So tonight, what we want to do is really dig in and feature some incredible individuals who are building an impactful career in responsible technology. And we've found some wonderful panelists from all different parts of the responsible tech ecosystem. So hopefully everyone can learn something from each of these individuals tonight. So we're going to focus on the impactful careers that you're building, where you're working right now, how you got there, and what you hope to do in the future, what your career goals are, what impact you really hope to make. And then finally, we want to talk about how everyone here can build a responsible tech career as well. So I'm going to start by kind of reflecting a little bit on my own path here. So I got involved in responsible technology starting in about 2020. And what I really noticed was that there was this emerging field of responsible tech with these new teams popping up, especially within the tech industry, in different teams and departments that were forming with different names. Some of them were responsible innovation, ethical AI, digital ethics, algorithmic accountability, the Office of Ethical and Humane Use, things like that. And then I also noticed that this was not only happening within the tech industry, this was also happening in other industries. I was seeing these teams pop up in finance, in pharmaceuticals, fashion, media, consumer electronics, you name it. And so I was building a job board to track all these different teams. But what I noticed was that these teams were expanding and growing, and that basically any company that had to deal with large amounts of user data, or any company that was using machine learning in any capacity, needed to consider the impacts of their technologies and all the data that they were consuming. So these teams were really growing until about halfway through last year, started seeing hiring freezes, layoffs across the tech industry, and this contraction of these types of roles. So what, in this very kind of dark time for the job market, what we started considering at All Tech is Human is that this really is, a silver lining could be that this is an opportunity for civil society, for government, to find these individuals who already have indicated, they care about the social impacts of the tech tools that they're building. They're committed to reducing the harms of technology. That these individuals would be perfect to snap up and take on some roles across civil society and the government. So we were really thrilled to partner with Schmidt Futures when we launched Techalo with them very recently. And if you haven't heard about Techalo yet, this is basically, it is a talent matchmaking platform. It's completely free. And we're connecting impact-oriented organizations with individuals who care about different causes. So the whole point of Techalo is to empower tech talent to take their skills and to build a career doing something that they care about, for causes that they're passionate about. So if you haven't had an opportunity yet, please check out this booth right over here. Elsa and her colleagues can help sign you up if you're looking for a new role, or if you're an employer that has a role that you would like to be looking for talent for. So, okay, so that brings me to the first question for the night, and I'm gonna start with Ginny. All right, so Ginny has done a lot of different things in her career, but right now is devoting her time to public interest technology, is working for an incredible nonprofit, Consumer Reports. So would love to hear about your story, how you got where you are, and what you do at Consumer Reports.
Absolutely, thanks, Rebekah. My name is Ginny Fahs. I work at Consumer Reports, which is a nonprofit working with and for consumers to make the marketplace more fair and safe. At Consumer Reports, I lead the product and R&D function within our innovation group. So my job is about making sure that this nearly 100-year-old nonprofit is equipped with the tools, technologies, and talent to build for a future that puts consumers first. I started my career in Silicon Valley. I think I graduated from school perhaps at the absolute height of tech optimism, and so many of my classmates, myself included, marched off to Silicon Valley and got tech jobs. My first job was in a Series B startup in a marketing function. I ended up choosing to pursue a coding boot camp coming out of that role because I wanted a deep grounding in how the technology worked as a technologist who planned to spend my career in this industry. And so I ended up becoming a software engineer at Uber. Out of that, I was at Uber for a few years. And throughout my time working in industry in San Francisco, was feeling like these skills I was developing surely had public interest applications. I just didn't quite know what that looked like. I had been a humanities major undergrad, had thought a lot about wanting to contribute to civil society, wanting to build in the public interest, but felt like I didn't know what that looked like. I was lucky at that time to see a call for applications to a program at the Aspen Tech Policy Hub that was about helping technologists better understand what policy impact we might be able to influence with our skills. So I was part of the first cohort in the Aspen Tech Policy Hub, the first fellowship cohort there, and that was where I started to see and understand all the different ways that my skills as a technologist could be of service in a public interest context. I also went to grad school. I got my MBA, and it was after that that I landed at Consumer Reports, where I lead a product team, so products, engineers, data scientists, trying to build and prototype into what a consumer-first marketplace could look like. And we have a portfolio of products that are proving out examples of how we want the market to work differently.
Great, thanks. And you're a great example of someone who has a humanities background and who has been able to apply that in the tech industry. A lot of our audience has that same experience, so that's great. Okay, so next up is Kristina. Would love to hear from you how you got to where you are at Jobs for the Future.
Absolutely. So I'll tell you first about Jobs for the Future. Hey, everyone. So good to see you. So Jobs for the Future is the innovation arm for, JFF Labs is the innovation arm for Jobs of the Future, a 40-year-old nonprofit that actually started as Jobs for Connecticut's Future. I love sharing that because I grew up in Windsor, Connecticut, not too far from West Hartford. But of course, when I was growing up and I was asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I did not say, I want to be executive director for JFF Labs. JFF Labs did not exist then, but I am excited because what we are doing is actually focusing on transforming workforce and education and learning, everything that goes with that. Alex Swartzel is here today. She actually leads our new Center for AI and Future of Work. What we do at JFF Labs, we're actually looking at insights, incubation, and investment. So we're looking at everything that's new within education and learning and work. And that's exciting because we get to ask the questions that haven't been asked yet. We get to test and experiment with things that haven't been in the market long enough. And so if anyone is here who has ideas around workforce and education, let us know. But let me tell you how I got here, because it wasn't, a A to B road. So I grew up house of educators, and what I was told that I can be growing up was a nurse, a teacher, or an administrator. I knew that I had to go to college, but I was like, I'm not sure that I want to do those things. But every time someone asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said one of those things for a long time. Went to college, got my degree in psychology and education, psychology in psychology and, what is that when you write? English. Yes, because I use it every day. And when I graduated, I started working for a research organization, and the goal was to work for a year before I went back to get my PhD in child psychology. But it was the height of the .com, and the second week I was there, they said, we need someone to help out with database administration. And I was like, I'll help out. What do I need to do? And they're like, we don't actually know. This is the first time we've had that role. And so they actually sent me to get certified, and I know that now to be work-based learning and apprenticeship. Got paid to learn how to build databases and become a software developer, and spent 20 years as a software developer. Started off as an individual contributor, and then when I left the company that I was at for 12 years, I was leading a team of about 125 software developers, cyber analysts, and supporting Department of Defense CIOs. Who knew I was going to do that? But left in 2016 because I was burnt out, to be honest, and I wasn't sure that that's what I wanted to do. I left in October, right before the election of 2016. The world changed, and I got really involved in entrepreneurship, actually started my own consulting company, and started to help and invest in women-owned tech companies. Did that for about 4 years, and then the pandemic happened. At the time, my kids were quite young. They were 12 and 11. And I saw the world through their eyes, and I saw how the world was changing rapidly, and it just so happened, I call it serendipity, that an executive recruiter reached out and told me about this Jobs for the Future. I'd never heard of them, even though they're a 40-year-old nonprofit. And initially, I wrote back and said, here are 6 people who can do the job. I didn't put my name in the hat. And they called those 6 people, and they called me back, and they said, we want you to put your name in the ring for it. And I was like, what is this? What is this organization? Put my name in the ring, and I'm so glad that I did. It is one of the best jobs. You know those jobs you're like, I want this job where I can do all the things that I love and have fun and this and that, and that's what this job is. And so that's how I got here.
Amazing. Thank you, Kristina. All right, next is Danielle. I'm really excited to hear from you, to hear your story. I've gotten to know Danielle actually at these mixers. Like, this is our 3rd time to really get to connect, and I have gotten to hear some of your story, and it's amazing. So I would love to hear if you could share that with everyone here.
Yeah, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Sutton, and I'm really excited to be here, and I'm truly honored to be on this wonderful panel of just incredible folks. And I'm actually very excited, especially to talk about it from a perspective of someone who's earlier on in her career, trying to navigate this responsible tech ecosystem that's ever changing. And I think one of the big things that I've realized very early on was that responsible tech is truly one of the greatest social justice issues of our time, and it is also one of the greatest market opportunities. And that rarely happens, honestly, this convergence of events. And so I found it really exciting in my own journey to be able to explore and navigate that space. So a little bit about how I actually got into my role. I'm currently a senior consultant at Deloitte, and I primarily work at the intersection of criminal justice and responsible tech. So a very exciting intersection, but essentially how I started out was in sophomore year of college. I was majoring in political science and psychology. Not English. But still, liberal arts. And I thought I was going to be a lawyer, so I decided to intern at Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem. I'm from Harlem, the generation. And so I decided to intern there. And while I was there, I was actually able to do research on different issues affecting the criminal defense space. And one of those issues was algorithmic bias in policing software. And specifically, the software that I was looking at is a software that basically uses information, data that's historically based off of generations of over-policing communities of color where I'm from, and uses that information to determine where to deploy police officers. And of course, naturally the whole garbage in, garbage out situation, where the more that information is, saying that black folks, commit certain crimes, and at higher rates, then you have this kind of nasty feedback loop. So you're continuously pushing people out into those areas. And so ultimately it creates this amplifying effect of the biases that we already see, but this time under the guise of objectivity in technology. And so that just hit me to my core. I was like, damn, this is going to be a major issue. And it's not just within the criminal justice space, but it's affecting all parts of our world. And so I was really intrigued by continuing on to this path, but I didn't really know how to, and I also knew I needed to make money. So after I graduated, I went into consulting before I would go and try and do maybe a grad school situation. And I found myself at Deloitte, and I was able to do a lot of exploring in my first year or two, where I was in the transportation space, doing projects there. I was doing projects in the healthcare space, and then I finally actually found a home within the criminal justice field as a result of the 2020 global protests that were happening, which then resulted in a lot of organizations as well as government leaders wanting to make inroads within this space. And so I was able to, I guess, take the wave, take advantage of that moment to be able to really build my career within the intersection of responsible tech and criminal justice. And so I've been doing that for the past 4 or so years now, where I've been able to focus primarily doing research on risk and needs assessments, facial recognition softwares, bail assessments, and so forth. And it has been really an incredible journey. And yeah, I would say that's how I got here.
Yeah, thank you for that, Danielle. All right, and finally we turn to you, Flynn. You've had a very interesting career up to this point. Would love to hear, you have a crucial perspective from, coming from the international human rights space. So we'd love to hear how you got where you are.
New York City, I'm so happy to be home. How are we doing tonight? I am delighted to be here. It's such an honor to be part of this, and David and Rebekah and everyone have worked so hard. So I'm so happy to be home and to be part of this growing ecosystem. And to me, it's just so exciting because I picture all the time this moment at one of my book events where someone came up to me and said, human rights, social justice, AI, they have nothing to do with each other. That was only a few years ago. I was like, have a seat, sir. And it's so exciting because the opportunities are growing because of everyone being here and because of being part of this. So it's an honor. And I guess I'll kind of bring it back a little bit to the beginning of my story connecting all of these dots into kind of how I got here today. So many moons ago, we're talking about technology, but we're talking about pre-AI, we're talking about pre-algorithms. I am an international human rights lawyer, and way back when my specialty began in the fields of crimes against humanity, international criminal justice, genocide, war crimes. And back then, we were looking at some of the first ways to use technology for human rights use. And at that time, that meant satellite imagery. And so I was trained on the software. We were pioneering this field because it didn't exist yet. And even when we were trained in this technology, and even when on a clear day, we had negotiated with the Russians to get access to the satellite, and there weren't any clouds, and we could see evidence of war crimes. So what we were looking at was to use this technology to see burnt out villages, mass graves, things like that. And even when we succeeded in doing it at the time, it was this rather impossible task. Even when we succeeded in all of this, and we saw what had happened on the ground, everyone was already dead and gone. And I remember so specifically thinking to myself, all of these people crowded in this room to try to do this work, some of them survivors of genocide themselves, I thought, we have to be able to do better. We have to think about creativity, social and moral imagination, and prevention. And we have to be able to marry these fields to be able to do better, to stop these things from happening, kind of like what we were just discussing. And from that point, I started down this path of thinking about the intersection of justice and human rights and technology. And as the technology grew, of course, that started to mean more intelligent technologies and algorithms and AI. And so down the algorithmic rabbit hole I went and started to get asked to speak and write and teach and think about these things, because the technology is new. Intelligent technology that we're talking about is new, but the idea of technology is as ancient as we are. Fire is technology, celestial navigation is technology, irrigation is technology. And the other thing that's ancient is ideas of social justice and activism and fighting for these things. So much of it is about amplifying these voices that already have so many ideas and so much brilliance. And it's just about pushing into those silos and breaking down those walls and the people that understand what they're doing. And so what I wanted to do in my work was to think about how do we bring that human perspective to technology. And I eventually wrote this book called A Human Algorithm, and so much of it is cutting edge and new, but again, the ideas are ancient. Why do we hurt each other? How do we treat each other better along the way? How do we use these tools that are evolving in tandem with who we are? Because the technology is here and it's not going anywhere. Whether you like it, whether you hate it, it's here. So the only question for me is, how do we use it for good, for justice, for human rights? That to me is the only question. And so I took a rather non-traditional path. I am an international human rights lawyer and a teacher and a writer. And for me, it was really always about thinking about that human perspective. And I know that we'll talk about this tonight, but being able to think about, yes, on the international, global level, but ultimately all of these solutions also have to be local. And what I love about All Tech is Human, I've kind of been here since the beginning, right? So to think about this idea that no one of us can do this alone. Like individually we are so small, but together there really is no star we can't dream of exploring. And so that is how I ended up here. I think like all of us, part of it is thinking about the things we're passionate about, and part of it is just walking through those open doors. So delighted to be here.
Yeah. Really appreciate all of you sharing your stories. Amazing. So I want to look into the future. And Kristina, we'll start with you on this one. I would love to know what kind of impact do you ultimately hope to make in your career?
Yeah, so jobs for the future, I'll talk about jobs of the future and then what I'd like to make, because it's all about humanity right now. It truly is. Jobs for the future, we have a new North Star that is in 10 years, 75 million Americans who experience systemic barriers get into a quality job. And for us, a quality job not only is wages and salary, but the ability to advance, the ability to get training, get paid for, to be able to live your life in a way that you want to have dignity in your work, so to speak. And so we're working on ways to make that an option for everybody, not just a small few, and that's how we've had it before, just with the inequities. So what I didn't mention before my story is that I grew up with my grandparents. My grandfather was an elementary school principal for 40 years. That is the one job that he had. And his dedication to the community and to his teachers and to the children, I learned that watching him. Now, when I fast forward to the work I'm doing, it's a legacy, right? My grandmother was also a teacher, a principal, opened up Montessori schools. And my mom right now supports the teachers union in Connecticut. And so I look at how the dots are connected in life. It's no wonder that I am where I am. I tell people a lot of times that my mission in life is to make sure that people can live in their genius. I say it all the time. And so I said that even before I went to JFF. And when we talk about walking through the door and allowing life to kind of bring you to the area that allows you to live your mission, that's what JFF allows me to do. And for me, it is making sure that everyone in this room, all the people in different communities, those who are suffering, that we can come together as a people, as a community, as a humanity, to make sure that people can live in the way that gives them dignity and allows them to give the gifts and talents to the world.
Yeah, thanks for that. All right, Danielle, you are up next. You are closer to the beginning of your career. Would love to hear where you see yourself going, what impact you would like to make.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the question, and then also, you really made me think, Kristina, about the way in which, honestly, my own family has shaped my own experience and stuff like that, because also, I come from a long legacy of social justice warriors, they were, lawyers, they were people on the ground during the civil rights movement fighting for, our rights on an everyday basis. And so I think I also am seeing my own journey through that lens as well. And so for me, I feel like my North Star is really to create a more equitable tech future, particularly for vulnerable communities that I'm a part of. And so when I look back, I use this North Star to determine what my short-term career goals are, essentially to be able to inform what direction I want to go in. And so most immediately, how I'm trying to do that is I'm actually going to be pursuing my master's in technology policy. I'm actually going across the pond. I'm going to the University of Cambridge to get this global perspective on a global issue that we face. And I'm really looking forward to understanding how we can create a more inclusive approach to the development of policy as well as regulation in this space, while also making sure that we support innovation. And ultimately, I'll be coming back to New York because this is my home. And at that point, it will be determining, okay, do I want to continue on to, with my studies, or do I want to transition into, a different field? But ultimately, I think to give voice, I would say to I'm on the cusp of Gen Z and millennial. It's a weird, it's a weird thing. But to give voice to that generation, I would say is, oftentimes I find myself being like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. There's so many different paths I could take. Which one is the right one for me? And it can be overwhelming to just take the first step, And so for me, having that North Star and then guiding on kind of developing my career as a set of beads, if you will, on a necklace. I can put the first bead on and then determine oh, I like the texture, I don't like the texture, I don't like the look of it, I don't like the color of it, whatever. And then basing my perspective on what I put on the next. And I can at any point change that pattern if I would like. But ultimately, it is with the underlying string of how do I create a more equitable tech future, and being able to be intentional about that while giving myself grace in what that manifestation looks like.
Amazing. Flynn, I would love to hear from you next.
Okay, impact. I love hearing what everyone has to say. And again, it just fills me with such joy, because I'm often asked, as I'm sure many of us are, what brings us hope in these troubled times? And I feel like hope is such a rebellion, as is joy, and to think about all these ways that we're coming together. An interesting way, I think, to think about impact is we definitely live in a time and in a space, and certainly in the digital space online with social media, thinking about building our LinkedIn bio and building our resume and thinking about all these things and the things that we absolutely need to do to get ahead, to pay the rent, to bring back these ideas to our communities. And what I think about a lot is this idea that ultimately we can't take any of what we do just for ourselves with us, right? What we do for ourselves dies with us. And I think we live so much, as someone who lives a lot of her life abroad, we live very much in an individualist culture. And that can bring incredible innovation and incredible independence, but thinking about this collective community legacy, I think, is incredibly important. And it also takes the pressure off having to do all of these things for ourselves, because what we do for ourselves dies with us. What could we give away? What could we take and then bring back to our communities? That's ultimately all that lives on, these little ripples that we're able to connect with. And we also don't know going forward what those ripples are going to look like, those ripples of hope, those ripples of something you say to someone to inspire them. So I think about ways, to have an impact are to do the next best thing, to bring another chair to the table and to amplify not just our own voices, but whose voice is missing at this table. And critically, whose voice is missing at this table that is someone that's maybe unlike ourselves, not just a friend, not just someone we're familiar with. How are we, Albert Schweitzer would say, widening that crucible of humanity to think about more and more ways that we're being more and more radically inclusive. Because another thing is that there's so many problems that are wicked and intractable. But the thing that we can do is have more lived experience at the table, more and more voices. And human rights, the entire idea is there for everybody. And when we lift someone else up, we all rise. And so it's that challenge, because at the same time, kind of like being in this room, inevitably, when you think about democratic movements, social justice movements, human rights movements, inevitably it's a critical small mass of people that make this change. And so how are we coming together with people to kind of think about moving together collectively, as opposed to the impact that I have, because I can't take any of that with me. And to me, frankly, it's not interesting. And so what are we doing to build that like community legacy, I think is incredibly important. And then it also reminds you, if it's not about yourself, then that widens your circle for what you're able to do. So that's how I like to think about impact, and then just going through the door that opens in front of us.
I'm loving the answers to these questions. This is great. All right, we're going to end with you, Jenny. Can you tell us about the impact you would like to make?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many wonderful things that have been said. I especially love this necklace metaphor and the beads on the necklace. I'm a builder, and so for me the question is, who am I building for? And in general, there are two groups you're building for. You're building for the user, and then you're building for like the institution or the team that you're part of, right? And what's exciting me in my career right now is feeling really connected to both of who I'm building for. The user of what we build is the consumer. The consumer is all of us. We all buy things to live our lives, so we all navigate the marketplace. And then who am I also building for? I'm building for an 100-year-old nonprofit that is trying to use technology in service of its mission. Additionally, something that I'm thinking about a lot right now is that often the benefits of new technologies are first enjoyed by the wealthiest organizations, the wealthiest people. And so what's exciting to me about building for an organization that is trying to serve all consumers right now is this sense that I'm able to build for everyone participating in the market. Building for government is another version of this, right? Taking one's skills, and government's, as old an institution as they come in this country, but figuring out how to deploy the latest technologies towards serving anyone possible. That's a thread, or kind of a strand, to use your metaphor, that's giving me energy in my career right now.
Awesome. All right, so for this, and we have one more question tonight, and for this one we'll start with you, Flynn. So everyone in this room is trying to build an impactful career in responsible technology in one way or another. So would love to hear from each of you. How can other people build impactful careers in responsible tech as well? What advice or tips do you have, especially from your own perspective, your own little slice of the responsible tech ecosystem? What worked well for you, and what advice would you have?
I love this question because I just had a flash across my mind as you were saying that, for example, my PhD students now, they can literally, there's an entire department related to tech and society and human rights and democracy, and we didn't have something like that. And thinking about all the different ways that we have people in this room connecting around these issues and that collaborative spirit. I mean, the thing I think about often is, for example, the JWST, the James Webb Space Telescope, and how there's so many things in technology that have gone so deeply wrong. Bias, discrimination, racism, sexism, misogyny, and no piece of tech is perfect, but we have this piece of tech, this honeycomb that we've unfurled in the sky that's able to see 13 billion years into the past, the dawn of the universe, based on the collaboration of thousands of scientists and the people that made it happen. And so when you think about something like that, that extraordinary, how do we figure out a way forward using the tools that we have to say, this is the moral and social imagination I want to have the future. We have to have that fearlessness, that bravery, and that courage. And we kind of have to have like that love affair with what's uncertain and unknown. And saying, hey, this department doesn't exist, but I'm going to thinking about criminal justice and algorithms, and who can I follow and work with that's already doing that? And hey, I'm going to put my name in the hat. And hey, and I'm a builder, and I know about the consumer and the institution, and how are we marrying all these things? This idea of combinatorial creativity is, I think, incredibly important. And to be able to say, yeah, I know no one's put these together, but let me try, let me ask the question. I think about this quote called "Live the Questions" by Raina Maria Rilke. And so how do we live every day those questions, and just being here in this room, asking those questions and not being afraid. That's the beauty of technology. I can connect with a farmer across the world and ask a question and they might answer. I can meet someone at this mixer and say, hey, have you thought about this? And not being afraid to be wrong and not being afraid to kind of dive into the uncertainty, I think is so, so critical. And that not being afraid to ask those, what David White calls courageous questions, and have those courageous conversations. And it's so, so important for our future. And all of you being here is just incredibly important, because that's how we make the magic happen. So how can we find that bravery and that courage? And most critically, I mean, the critical piece for human rights and social justice is, how can I not just find it for myself, but it only begins when we're doing it for someone else. How am I fighting for someone else and understanding that their issues and their problems and what they face is no different from my own? You have to take that so personally. And that's how we change the systems.
Danielle.
Wow, I have chills. And I think that, I mean, to answer the question, I would say that, you know, I really love the idea of like questions, and what questions you ask inform what kind of answers you have and whatnot. And to bring that from like the philosophical approach, I would say, into the tactical one, I think of, I'm going to use the 3 system, since All Tech is Human is an org of 3 pillars. So I have found that the first one would be to build your experience based off of your passions and skill sets. Second one, to proactively communicate those passions and skill sets. And then the third one is to really engage within the responsible tech ecosystem. So let's go to the first one. First one is around building your experience. And this is not just, oh, I need to become, a programmer. I need to, be a computer science major in order to get into this field. I'm going to say you don't have to do that. I mean, it's probably helpful, but you don't have to do that. I didn't do that. And it's about being able to recognize, because each person has a unique skill set and areas of passions, and that can be totally transferable into this space. So for me, like I majored in political science. I became, more focused in criminal justice policy. I took that policy analysis competency and brought it into the responsible tech ecosystem by then saying, oh, I can do policy analysis with AI policies. And then once I had AI on my resume, I could say, oh, I can do now more AI strategy work. So really, it goes back to the analogy, I guess, of stringing like the necklace along. But it's about creating an experience, a set of experiences that are unique to you and your skill sets. Secondly, being able to communicate about them. That's huge, because no one's going to know that you're interested or you're passionate about this issue unless you say it. And I think that sometimes, and I've often experienced this with imposter syndrome and what have you, where you're just not comfortable enough to actually vocalize what your passions are and what your competencies lie in. And the value of doing that allows other people, leaders, peers, what have you, to be able to identify you as a person that they could work with if they have this particular issue that they come across. And so automatically in their mind, you come up. And you want that. You want to create that brand association that allows you to catapult into the space in your career. And then last but not least, it's to engage. And you guys are already here, so you guys basically already did it. But it's about being able to make sure that you are connected into the responsible tech ecosystem. I mean, I started coming to the All Tech is Human events maybe 2 years ago, and it's incredible, the people that you meet here. It really is. So I'm going to encourage everyone to mingle afterwards. But also, All Tech is Human, this is a little pitch, I guess, also has an incredible mentorship program that I was a part of as a mentee, which is a great opportunity to, understand what it takes really to get into the space as well and meet other peers who are in it. And then also just resources. The job board is incredible. It's going to be revamped too, so it's very exciting. But all in all, I would say those 3 things of one, building your experience based off of your unique skills and passions. Secondly, to proactively communicate those passions and skills, and then to continuously engage. And I think the combination of those three things has allowed me, and I hope would allow other people to be able to not only engage in their career revolution, but then also their human revolution, engaging how we can transform the future of tech.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I like that, Danielle. Thanks for the plug also. We just launched another mentorship cohort. We have 450 people in this one from 40 countries, so it's going crazy. So, all right, next up, Ginny.
Similar to Danielle, I'll offer 2 nuggets of more tactical advice, particularly for folks who are trying to break into the responsible tech space for the first time. The first is go where you are rare. This is a quote from Megan Smith, the former CTO of the United States under Obama, but she talked about how people who bring a skill set that an organization or group of people don't currently have are able to enact more creative work when they arrive. And that's certainly been true for me in my career. There aren't a lot of people in my organization with backgrounds like mine who worked in Silicon Valley, who did MBA, whatever else. And so I feel like that's enabled a way to creatively engage and kind of spark new work and projects that has been one of the more exhilarating parts of my current role. Additionally, I would say for folks who are transitioning into responsible technology for the first time, there are ways to run small-scale experiments to see what sorts of roles are going to be a good fit for you. Particularly if you're interested in working for a nonprofit. Lots of nonprofits and governments too have kind of smaller consulting engagements where you're able to embed with a team, try on what it looks like to work in this way, and better understand the environment you'd be working for and with. And that's been really crucial for me in my career as well. Most of my big career transitions have started with some sort of consulting contract or internship or apprenticeship or way to try on the role. And I feel like that's really helped clarify decision making to get to experience a day in the life myself, see the team I'll get to be working with, and make calls about where to move based on the people, the project, the mission, and just how it feels day to day.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks, Ginny. All right, and we're going to close it with you, Kristina.
It's always hard going last, and people say such good things. I still am thinking about the social and moral imagination. I think that was a great way to put it, particularly right now. So I'll start just adding on to that is be curious, and this is a challenge, actually. When you find yourself complaining about something the next couple of days, the next couple of months, get a piece of paper and a pen and write down how you would solve that problem. Just shift that energy and become more curious and imaginative about that issue. So that's a challenge. The other, I think, for what was helpful for me was being the new person in the room and not being afraid to raise my hand, ask the question, to be wrong, and then seek someone out that I thought was right or inspirational or doing something that I wanted to do and asking them to spend a little bit of time with me. And when that person does provide that time, think about how you can pay that forward for someone else. And so if you're going to ask for something, give something in return. It always works out. I think the other thing that's helped me in my career is take the time to pivot. Take the time to pivot. So often we're moving so fast. We're making decisions. We want to get to that next level. And if we don't take a step back to say, what problem do I want to solve? What can I contribute in this situation? Do I want to live in New York or do I want to move to Florence? Give yourself that opportunity to really think about what you are doing, where you are, how you are being. So it's not just about doing, but also being. And have the courage to make that change. And then make sure you're building your community around you of people who, when you are down, they can lift you up, or you do have a question, or you are being courageous and crazy, that they're not going to say you're crazy, but let me help you. How can I help you? What can I do? So those are the areas that I would say.
Awesome, yeah. And that is a great note to end on. I do want to thank our panelists for sharing your expertise and your insights. It was really wonderful to be on stage with all of you. And I also I very much want to thank Schmidt Futures. I also want to thank Mozilla Foundation. Those are our sponsors for the night, and we could not have these events without them, so thank you so much.